Welcome to the Resairchia YouTube channel. My name is Jorge, and in this video I will introduce you to modeling with components in Modia. You can find almost all the code I will use in the Modia documentation. What I will try to do is this small circuit that they show in the documentation. The way they do it is very similar to the components used in Modelica. First, I will show the equivalent components written in the Modelica language. You can find them in the Modelica standard library, for instance in the Open Modelica connection editor. The most basic level of all the components is the pin. Think about it as the point where you connect your cable. It will have two variables, a potential variable, V, the potential, and a flow variable, the current, I. With this, we can build another component, the one port component. Think of it as some kind of component that will have cables connected to each side of it. As you can see, this component has the flow equations for the current. With this, we can start adding equations to build our components. The case of the resistor, for instance, contains Ohm's law. This model is a bit more advanced. It contains equations related to the temperature, but for our case, we will only consider Ohm's law. There are other components such as a capacitor, an inductor, and some kind of source, in this case a constant voltage. The voltage will be some parameter value that we will introduce. Now, if we go back to the documentation, we could try to find how this is written in Modia. Here we have the most basic component, the pin. Then we inherit the pin and we build our one port component in the same way as in the Modelica language. And next, as we have seen before, we can build a resistor or a capacitor or an inductor or our source, which is the constant voltage. If you look at the resistor, for instance, we define some parameter, in this case the resistance 1 ohm, and we add the equation that is missing from the one port model, Ohm's law. You only need to follow an equivalent procedure to obtain the other components. Now, to build this filter or circuit, whatever you want to call it, you only need to call the components you are going to use: constant voltage, resistor, capacitor, redefine the parameters in the model using map, and then declare the connections. The positive pin of the constant voltage goes to the positive pin of the resistor, the negative pin of the resistor goes to the positive pin of the capacitor, and the negative pin of the capacitor goes to the negative pin of the constant voltage. Once you have done this, you only need to instantiate and simulate. Let me do it for you in Julia. First, I tell Julia that I will be using Modia and plots. Next are different models, the pin, one port, resistor, and so on. All of them seem to work properly. Next, we can add the model of the circuit, or the so-called filter in this case, and instantiate it. Notice that I'm not using units when I redeclare the parameters of the components. I have been having problems when using units in the models, so I am removing the units to make it work until I figure out why I am getting the error. Now I simply instantiate the model, simulate and save the results in a variable called result, as I have been doing in previous videos, and declare a variable of times with all the simulation times. Perfect, everything simulates without problems. Now, since the components have several variables inside, I need to be able to access them. For doing so, I will use import Modia result. Then I declare a variable, and as in previous videos, I use getPlotSignal, and I call it using as arguments the name of the instantiated model circuit and between quotes the name of the variable whose values I want to store in my results obtained intensity variable. I will store now the values of the voltage to show another example, and now I will start plotting the different values. You can see how the capacitor changes its voltage throughout time, or we can plot the value of the current at the positive pin of the constant voltage source. We can plot the voltage at the constant voltage positive pin. We can plot, for instance, the voltage of the capacitor. Again, we use getPlotSignal to obtain the value of the voltage and again plot the results. You can see how the capacitor changes its voltage throughout time. In this video, I assume that you have been following the tutorials and go through the different topics very fast. If you are not familiar with the different concepts here, I recommend you watching them so you can follow in the coming videos when we start trying to do more advanced things. Thank you so much for watching and see you in future videos.